Good morning and welcome to Football Diehards DFS Sunday Show with the crazy Week 17 of the NFL season. We've been waiting for this for 16 weeks, although there is some opportunity all through the insanity. And I'd like to welcome the popular and talented Jason Brady, and I am, of course, the old man of fantasy, Emil Kadlec. How's it going, Brady?
It's going pretty good. Insane week indeed. There's so much value on the slate. I'm excited. Let's get into it, and let's win some money on the last regular season game of the year.
Sounds good. We'll be going through, obviously, injuries and things as we progress. I think we pretty much understand it. So, all right, let's start with the quarterbacks.
All right, starting with the quarterbacks, for me this week, it's going to be between two guys that I'm really going to be high-owned on. The first one's going to be Deshaun Watson for Houston going against Tennessee, and he is 7,700, averaging 25.3 DraftKings points per game. And this total is 56.5, a game I really do want to target. And honestly, I'm not worried about ownership on any player, really. On a 15-game slate, I don't think somebody's going to be like too high-owned where it's really concerning, maybe outside of like a Derrick Henry. But this is the highest total on the slate, a solid matchup against Tennessee, solid stacking options, Brandon Cooks, Kiki Kuti. And I feel like this game definitely has potential to shoot out. So Deshaun Watson, I love the stacking options. I love this game, and he is probably my number one quarterback.
Yeah, speaking of ownership, like you said, there's a lot of games on the slate, which is very interesting. So you've seen a flattening out of ownership. Like the most owned quarterback is only 8.8%. Watson's the third most owned quarterback at 6.8%. So it's a little different than these shorter slates that we've gotten. Are you worried at all about the loss of the players in Houston? Do you still feel? I mean, Watson seems to perform no matter what, doesn't he?
Yeah, it seems like he's been doing fine. Although they have been losing players. I think they're getting Duke Johnson back today, possibly. So maybe that helps out a little bit in the passing game. But yeah, he's been doing good. Although he lost Will Fuller, which a lot of people thought that would hurt him a ton. But I think he's been doing fine.
Yeah, it hasn't killed him. Of course, they've been throwing the ball a lot to David Johnson. I don't know about last week, but the week before. So they're finding ways to make the production in the passing game.
Yep.
All right.
And then so moving on, and like it's between Deshaun Watson or the next guy, Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins is 1,400 cheaper at 6,300 going against Detroit. And this is a 54-point game total, which is the second highest in the slate. I feel like this game's getting a little bit overlooked. I feel like it definitely has potential to score very, very high against a really bad Lions defense. And the big story here is there's no Dalvin Cook. So I feel like there could be more passing. You have a fantastic matchup against one of the worst defenses in the league in Detroit. And I like the stacking options as well. Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith Jr., Adam Thielen. And Kirk Cousins seems pretty cheap here at 6,300. So definitely somebody I'm going to go to a lot. And honestly, it's between Watson and Cousins for who's going to be my personally highest owned quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting. Cousins is a guy, at the beginning of the season, people just don't trust for some reason, but he's really put up some huge games. He's at 6.25%. He's the fifth most owned quarterback. And he's had some really high ceilings this year. And Detroit, it's at Detroit. It doesn't really matter. Wow, yeah. This is an opportunity. And like you said, he's fairly reasonably priced, 6,300. So very tempting guy this week in Cousins.
Yeah, I like it a lot at Detroit and at Dome. And Detroit's defense is so bad. So And you'd think with no Dalvin Cook, they are going to try to pass the ball more. So, yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. Maybe Jefferson will get the rookie record today.
Yep, we'll definitely talk about that one too.
Oh, beautiful.
All right, so the next guy I do like, and I do think it's a little expensive, but Ryan Tannehill, 7,000, averaging 22.2 DraftKings points. That is that 56.5-point game total that I do want to attack here, which is the highest total on the slate. And a really good matchup against the Houston defense. And this is a nice way to get off that Derrick Henry chalk. And honestly, I don't think you have to really get off the chalk this week. But if you want to get a little bit different, I think attacking the passing game of Tennessee is not a bad look whatsoever. Good stacking options, A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, guys like that. So Tannehill, although I do think is a little too expensive at 7,000, I do think he has a lot of upside in a game that's projected to probably shoot out here.
Yep, another tempting play. He is the number one owned quarterback at but only 8.8%, like you said, because there's a lot of options here. But yeah, he's had some big games. He's run the ball too to put a little frosting on the fantasy scoring cake. And at Houston, you can see why he's the number one owned quarterback, even though the ownership is flat. But yeah, he's a fun one right there. He's done really well this year. He's had some big games. He's had a bit of a low floor sometimes, but don't they all?
Yeah, that's true. And then, so next is probably one that's going to be extremely low owned. It's going to be Matt Ryan going against Tampa Bay here, 5,900, and he is averaging 19.2 DraftKings points, and this total is a sneaky total of 50.5. And he just seems way too cheap here at 5,900 against a Bucs passing defense that hasn't looked all that great as of late. Clear stacking options, Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage. And Matt Ryan at 5,900, he's going to throw the ball a ton more than likely here. It's really hard to run the ball against Tampa Bay, and we saw the last time Matt Ryan played Tampa Bay, he had a really good game. So actually don't mind Matt Ryan here at that price of 5,900. I think it's way too cheap, honestly.
Yeah, he's only owned at 4.2%, so he's low owned, which really helps out. Are you worried at all about Tampa Bay's defense on him? I guess not.
No, not really. I'm worried about the run defense of Tampa Bay more than the passing defense, and Tampa Bay's passing defense looked pretty bad as of late. The last time Matt Ryan played Tampa Bay was in Week 15 a couple weeks ago. He had 34 completions, 356 yards, 3 touchdowns, scoring 30.84 DraftKings points, which I think that was Ryan's best game of the year.
Is 5,900, has his price been pretty stable, or has it moved much, Matt Ryan's?
Last week he was 5,800. In Week 15 he was 5,400. So he's been around that high 5K range pretty much.
Yeah, I guess that's not horrible. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Earlier in the year, he's low 6,000. Yeah, so it's pretty cheap price here. I actually don't mind the matchup in a game that probably should score high.
Great.
And then other than that, those are my top 4. I'm mostly going to go to Watson and Cousins. Was there anybody else you wanted to throw out?
Let me give you an insane play here.
Yeah.
Drew Lock.
Oh, yeah.
At home against Las Vegas, who is out of the playoffs. And, they haven't had the greatest defense lately. $5,000. He's owned at 2.5%. Am I getting crazy here?
No, I was actually definitely looking at Locke because I love his stacking options. Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, guys like that. And, yeah, like you said, he's 5K with a decent matchup. So, yeah, he's somebody that almost made my player pool. Maybe I'll throw him in a couple lineups. But, yeah, that's not a bad call at all.
Cool. Well, remind me when we talk about Jeudy when we get to wide receivers, because we'll look at his numbers. But he's been an extremely frustrated receiver who's starting to perform. And his ownership is low, so we'll go through those numbers later. But yeah, Locke is kind of an interesting, intriguing guy for GPP. Scary, but intriguing.
I will throw this out. John Wolford for the Rams, 4,900 against Arizona. Pretty good matchup there. And Wolford's able to run the ball. Maybe he gets a rushing touchdown. And this is a game that the Rams need to win. So I think Wolford, I don't know. I mean, it's so cheap, but how can you trust him?
Well, that's an interesting point because I think they showed the tape on him. He can run the ball.
Yeah, he can.
So that may be a situation. He's owned by 1.2%. I mean, he's almost not owned, and he's $4,900. He's only $100 cheaper than Locke, which is disappointing.
Yep.
But if you're playing a lot of lineups, he may be a guy you want to get in, just at a small percentage, just because. GPP, low ownership, things we don't know. He matches that.
Oh, yeah.
High risk, though, obviously.
Very high risk, but you never know. He could be one of those Week 17 crazy plays. Maybe he gets a rushing touchdown or two. So
something that could be the big difference. And right now, Cam Akers is a game time decision, and it's a late game, so we're not going to really know. Of course, you got Malcolm Brown, who typically can run the ball at the goal line anyway. But things to think about.
Yep. So getting into the running backs, and I would be kind of shocked if this guy was not the number one running back on the slate or owned running back, and it's going to be Derrick Henry, 9,400. He is averaging 21.7 DraftKings points per game, and this is that total of 56.5 points here. And really good matchup against Houston, one of the worst run defenses in the league. You have huge ceiling and touchdown upside on the highest total of the slate for Henry here. And what I do like about this game for Henry is they are favorites. I think they're 7-point favorites last time I checked. That means they should be out front running the ball. When I don't like to play Henry is when they are projected to be coming from behind. That means less running attempts for Henry. So he should be just running the ball a ton this game. Hopefully gets that 30-plus attempts because we have seen him get it so far this year. So, Derrick Henry, 9,400. I think it's probably like a must-play in cash. It's really hard to ignore the upside against this Houston defense.
Wow. Yeah. You got a guy at $9,400 who's extremely attractive. The second most owned running back, 19% owned. He's just been a gold mine, chalk, etc. You'll be surprised, though, there's a guy above him who's at 25% owned.
Dang.
Yeah, I'll wait and tell you later who that is in case you talk about him.
All right, I'm curious now. Next guy we have is Jonathan Taylor, 7,400 against Jacksonville, and I would like this play a lot. It's a $2,000 savings off of Derrick Henry, and Taylor is averaging 15.8 DraftKings points per game. You have a 49-point game total here, and I love the matchup and the game script here for Taylor. The Colts are 14-point favorites. That means they should be out ahead running the ball. And Jacksonville's defense is very, very bad, and one of the worst defenses in the league. And, I don't mind the price at $7,400. And Taylor's actually been looking very, very good as of late in his last 4 games. 19.4 DraftKings points against a tough Steelers defense, 19.5, 33.5, and 22.5 DraftKings points. Getting a decent amount of touches as well. So, Jonathan Taylor is somebody I'm really looking at against Jacksonville this week.
Yeah, Jonathan Tater has really come on the last few games and kind of done what people were hoping he would do as a rookie. It's tough for rookies; you just never know. But running backs usually perform. But it's interesting. It's how much better he's gotten the last few weeks, and he's at 17% owned. He's the third most owned, just below Henry. But that's $2,000 cheaper.
Yes.
So man, that's a really tempting play if you've got some other things in mind that you want to save some money on, because he's got a chance to perform close to Henry. I don't want to say exactly because Henry's playing at Houston, but they're playing home against Jacksonville. So yes, those are very attractive plays.
Yes, my goal is to get them both in the same lineup, and it's definitely possible this week.
That's interesting. Okay. I may try that myself.
Yeah. All right, so the next play I have here is going to be Alexander Madison, who is 6,100 going against Detroit, and he is averaging 5 DraftKings points per game in that 54-point game total. And the big thing here is going to be no Dalvin Cook. Has a fantastic matchup against one of the worst, if not the worst, run defenses in the league in Detroit. It's all up to the workload of Madison. I don't know what he's going to do, how much work he's going to get, but if he does get a decent-sized workload, I think he's going to have a very good game against a very, very bad defense. But there are some question marks. He has been battling some injuries the past couple weeks, something to think about there. But 6,100, wish it was a little bit cheaper, but you really can't complain against this Detroit matchup here.
Yeah. He hasn't always come through when he's the main guy, at least recently. Yeah. But let's not look too far back, because, like you said, at Detroit, $6,100. He's 9.4% owned. He's 1, 2, 3, 4. He's tied for 5th most owned with Myles Gaston. So that is a very attractive play, no doubt about it.
Oh yeah. So this next play, I'm really curious to hear the projected ownership on it. It's going to be Ty Montgomery for the Saints going against Carolina here, and he is minimum price at $4,000 at a 46.5-point game total. So the big thing here is Saints are pretty much missing all of their running backs, which puts Montgomery in line for some more work at $4,000. And I know that and I'm already expecting it to happen. Taysom Hill is going to steal some carries. Taysom Hill is going to steal some touchdowns. But still, at 4,000 with a running back that can catch the ball, Drew Brees is more than capable of dumping off the ball to the running back. And this really sneaky game total and a really good matchup against Carolina, who is one of the worst against the run. I think Ty Montgomery at 4,000 is a really, really, really good play. And you really don't need much at 4,000, but I do think there's some decent upside actually here.
Yes, and he was the number one owned running back that I was teasing earlier. He's at 25.5%. So people are on this. And it has to do with all the things you said, but $4,000 is a hell of a low salary for a guy who is probably going to get a lot of touches and a lot of targets with huge unknown. But that game's still important to New Orleans, I think, for positioning, if I'm not incorrect.
Yeah.
So it still may be important for, it's an important game for New Orleans. So, yeah, that's crazy. The number one owned running back is a guy who hasn't played in how long?
Yeah, I don't think he's played. I think he's played once this year, maybe.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's 4,000. It's crazy.
That's a great number.
Yep. So the next play here, Melvin Gordon, 5,700 versus the Raiders. He's averaging 13.4 DraftKings points, and this total is 50.5, which is a really sneaky total here. I think it's the third highest on the slate. And of course, Lindsey's not playing. Gordon should get the majority of the carries. And I think it's a good total here. I think there's some scoring upside for Gordon. Didn't have a great game last week, and what confused me last week was he wasn't involved in the passing game at all. 0 targets, 0 receptions. Usually they involve him in the passing game at least a little bit. So I do expect them to get back to that a little bit. So 5,700, not a bad look for Gordon here. Him being the number one guy, him being the Lindsey not playing, I do think he has like 20 plus touch upside easily.
Yeah, with Lindsey out, you're really expecting him to get some targets like he did the week before.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to get those targets back. He's got a little frosting on the cake. He's low owned. It's 4.7%, so he's a good GPP type guy. So he's very, very tempting to play. But hopefully he can get a few targets and add to his totals and get in the end zone also. So yeah, I like that play. 4.7% for Gordon.
Yep. I like it too. And then there are some more value guys. And then, like I said, there's a ton of value this week. We just talked about Ty Montgomery at 4,000. Somebody else that's really interesting is going to be Ty Johnson, who is 4,300 against the Patriots, averaging 5.2 DraftKings points. So the big thing here is the total is 40 points, which is the worst on the slate, but still, he's pretty much the only running back on the Jets right now. He have a low game total, but I still think he has that pass catching upside. And I think it's fine. I think he's fine at 4,300 just for the pass catching upside there.
Yep, that's an excellent play. And New England hasn't been playing very good defense lately. He's essentially 6% owned, so he's relatively low owned. Ty Johnson. Yeah, I like that play. He's the guy this week for the Jets. The Jets have been playing better in period. They've been playing better defense too. So they're giving the offense the ball more frequently. So Ty Johnson's a sneaky play.
So the last time he got like a kind of a full workload, it was Week 13 against the Raiders, where he had 22 rushing attempts, 104 yards, scoring 23.7 DraftKings points. So he is more than capable of having a good game here.
Fantastic. That is a fun play.
And then
it's going to be hard figuring out all these lineups in the next few hours.
I know. I mean, we could make a 2-hour video of all the plays for this week. It's insane. A 15-game slate. It's crazy this week.
Great.
All right. Then the last one I really want to touch on is going to be Malcolm Brown. We touched on it earlier in the video, but if Cam Akers does not play, I think Malcolm Brown's like a really good play at 4,300, averaging 7.2 DraftKings points. It is a 41-point game total, but this is a game that the Rams need to win here. So look for Akers to be out. And what sucks about it is going to be that this game is a 4 o'clock game. So maybe take a risk, but you are able to change lineups at least on DraftKings if it does get into later games. So Malcolm Brown is definitely something I'm looking at, but there is a threat of Cam Akers possibly playing, which would make this play not great.
Oh, it's good that on DraftKings you can flop that out, and I think that you have to be planning on that and being ready to know who you're going to flip in there. He's the fourth most owned. Malcolm Brown's the fourth most owned running back, 12.7%. So he's fairly he's fairly high up there in ownership. So, we got to decide on Cam Akers, so we'll be ready for that. But that's a $4,300 is a very attractive salary, and we know this guy runs at the goal line.
Yep, that is true. So something to think about there, something to look out for. Somebody I do want to throw out real quick is Ezekiel Elliott is just way too cheap at 6,400. If you would have told me earlier in the year that Ezekiel Elliott was 6,400 against the Giants, I would have probably called you crazy. But this is, I believe, like the cheapest he's ever been this year. Yeah, he is. So 6,400 against the Giants. I think it's something to definitely look at. Last week, he had 19 attempts, 105 yards. Also had 4 targets, 4 receptions, scoring 20.9 DraftKings points. I still think the upside is there, and I think this is a solid price to look at. So Elliott's somebody I'm looking at this week as well.
That's interesting. I can't believe it. Elliott is 2.6% owned on DraftKings. He's 4.2 on FanDuel, but boy, 2.6. That is really low, isn't it?
That's low, especially considering this is his lowest price of the year. Pretty interesting there.
There's no confidence, which makes him for a very tempting GPP consideration, at least in a few of your lineups.
Yep, and then the last guy I want to throw out is going to be Deandre Swift, 6,300 in a game that's predicted to score high, 54 points. I think he's fine. He's 100 cheaper than Elliott at 6,300 there. So Swift is somebody else I'm looking at, but most of my lineups are going to consist of Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and Ty Montgomery. Those are probably my main 3 there.
And by the way, going back to Elliott, that game, they're in playoff contention, both teams, the Giants and the Cowboys. Of course, they got to hope that Washington loses to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia's out of it, so I'm not sure how hard they'll play. But, yeah, so on top of that, the Dallas they're in the playoff hunt. This is a playoff game for them. So, they're going to take that game seriously is what I'm trying to say. Swift is a lot higher owned. He's at 7.7% owned. So about top 10, basically the top 10. So,
was there anybody else you wanted to throw out?
I was going to throw out Rodney Smith. Let me look him up real quick. He was extremely low owned. Oh, there he is. No, yeah, there he is. My brain can't see. Maybe I should put my glasses on. Anyway, Rodney Smith, $4,000, running for Carolina. I think he's the number 1 runner right now in their going into this week. 4,000. He's 8.5% owned, but $4,000 is a very tempting number for him.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, and Jeff Wilson is a guy I like to play. He's a little higher owned. He's $6,000 and he's 6.4% owned. He's a guy. There's so many options that you've pointed out here at running back. I'm not sure if Wilson is high on the list, but at $6,000. But he's a guy who can score touchdowns there at home against Seattle. And Seattle's defense has gotten better, but still a very important game it's important for Seattle. Maybe it's not even important for Seattle because they've locked in. So I don't really know how that's going to affect the game.
Yeah,
so those are the couple I had at running back to add to what you've already talked about.
I like it. I mean, if this was like we have a 15-game slate, we have so many good plays. Yeah, Wilson's fine. Rodney Smith, if Ty Montgomery was not a play, if Ty Johnson, I'd probably would go to Rodney Smith for sure. I do think he has some upside, pass catching upside, and Jeff Wilson. He had a really good game against Arizona, 30.4 DraftKings points, so definitely capable of having a good game. But yeah, definitely 2 guys that are for sure in play.
Sounds good. That's what I.
All right. So getting into the wide receivers here, starting up top with Devonta Adams at 9,200, and he is averaging 28 DraftKings points per game, which is almost 7 more than Derrick Henry, believe it or not. And this is a 50-point game total. Just an insane ceiling here with Adams. Lots of target, reception, and touchdown upside, and lots of value on the slate. We touched on so many value guys already. It makes it easy to get Devonta Adams if you want him, and I want him, so I'm going to have a decent amount of Devonta Adams here, even though he is 9,200, which seems crazy for a wide receiver, but, man, has Adams been good.
This is crazy. The only problem with Adams, as far as in-season is concerned, is they play him so much he gets hurt and he loses games. I just can't believe how this guy's done. Again, he's the number 1 owned wide receiver at 23.4%, very highly owned. which of course makes all sense. $9,200, and he's still probably worth it. It's crazy. At Chicago, does that worry you at all?
Yeah, it does. Chicago definitely has a good defense, but with a guy like Devonta Adams, you're really not worried about the matchup all that much. Had a monster game last week, 46.2 DraftKings points against Tennessee's defense. So yeah, I think he'll be fine. The ownership, like I said, it doesn't worry me too much on a 15-game slate. There's plenty of ways to be different, but yeah, I like Devonta Adams here, mostly in cash. I think you can get away from it in tournaments if you really want to, because of the bad matchup. But it's really hard to get away from it in cash just because of the nice floor he gets every single week.
Sounds good.
All right, so this next guy is going to be one of my favorite plays on the slate from the wide receiver position is going to be Justin Jefferson, 7,600, going against Detroit, averaging 18 DraftKings points per week in that 54-point game total, which is the second highest on the slate. So no, Dalvin Cook could lead to more passing for the Vikings, which leads to more receptions for Justin Jefferson, more targets for Justin Jefferson, and a great matchup against a really poor Detroit defense. Detroit is known for their bad running defense, but their passing defense is not much better. So, yeah, also in a dome, I do think that helps out as well. And hopefully they start passing the ball more. I'm going to load up on Justin Jefferson this week at 7,600.
Wow. Yeah, number 2 owned wide receiver, 21%. Like you said, great opportunity, $7,600. So you're getting him at a decent price. I mean, that's when you look at Devonta Adams, it looks like a decent price anyway. So yeah, that's a very attractive play. Love that guy. It's incredible what that rookie's done this year.
Oh yeah, and you mentioned it earlier. He needs how much yards for the rookie record this week?
I forget, maybe 50 or something like that.
Yeah, he needs something, but I think he'll get it here.
He could very well get it, and I'm looking forward to watching that game. I love that guy. I wish I had him in more dynasty leagues. I messed on that one.
Yeah, me too.
Excellent.
All right. So getting to the next play here is going to be Brandon Cooks for Houston going against Tennessee. 6,900, averaging 14.2 DraftKings points in that 56.5-point game total, which is the highest on the slate. Pretty good matchup against Tennessee. I love the Watson-Cook stack a lot this week. Brandon Cooks have kind of expected a little bit more out of him since Will Fuller has been out, but did have a breakout game last week, 10 targets, 7 receptions, 141 yards, a touchdown, scoring 30.1 DraftKings points. I do think he has that upside here as well. So Brandon Cooks is definitely somebody I like at 6,900.
Hey, he's 7.2% owned, medium owned, well, a little bit low, but not ultra low. Obviously, it's kind of hard to have him ultra low because he gets so many targets. So yeah, that's an interesting one. It's against Tennessee. It's important to Tennessee, but like you said, Watson finds a way to become productive by the end of the fourth quarter. So that sounds like a very attractive play.
Yep, I like that. I like it a lot, and I like the game a lot. That 56.5-point game total is huge.
Yeah, that's a big number.
Yes. All right, so on the flip side of things, A.J. Brown for Tennessee going against Houston here, 7,200. I really don't like the price of A.J. Brown, but it's really hard to ignore the upside against this Houston defense. He is averaging 17.4 DraftKings points, though, in the 56.5-point game total. And like I said, it's expensive, but it's a decent way to get off the Derrick Henry chalk if you really want to. Touchdown upside in what should project to be a high-scoring game. I do feel like this could be a potential shootout here. If the Titans were somehow to fall behind, I do think that they'll be able to pass the ball more, which will give Brown more targets and stuff. I'm not really expecting it to happen, but you never know. Sometimes we expect Derrick Henry to have a monster game, and sometimes it's Tannehill that has that monster game. So, and plus, it's probably going to be lower owned as well. So, at least lower owned than Henry's going to be. So, yeah, A.J. Brown's definitely something I'm looking at 7,200.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's the third most owned wide receiver this week at 16.7%. How dare him?
How dare him, indeed.
If that guy could stay healthy. What's interesting is, maybe, I don't know if you've got him on your list here, if you're worried about that ownership, at Corey Davis, he's at 6,200 and he's only 8.8%. When I say only, he's basically half owned than A.J. Brown. So I don't know, that may be something you can flip to if you want some of that game.
Yeah, I think people might be concerned because Davis put up a goose egg last week. Only 2 targets, 0 receptions, 0 points. Maybe that's scaring people away, but yeah, I think Davis is good as well.
Yeah, that would scare you. That is the concern it's been all year long. Is
Yeah.
Davis was really somebody who hasn't been productive last year at all. He was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, and all of a sudden, A.J. Brown was a little beat up at the beginning of the season, and Davis looked phenomenal. Physically, he looked great. He was catching the ball. He was getting yards after the catch, but his floor is kind of low, potentially.
It is. He did have that big game in Week 13 where he scored 38.2 DraftKings points against Cleveland.
Yeah.
So I mean, he can do it, but yeah.
Yeah, so those are tough choices, especially after such a poor performance in Week 16 for Davis.
Yeah. Yep, so the next guy here is going to be Russell Gage at 5,100, averaging 10.6 DraftKings points and a 15.5-point game total, which is the third or fourth highest on the slate. So solid price here. I love stacking with Matt Ryan for a nice cheap stack with some pretty good upside. I don't mind a Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage stack against Tampa Bay's defense here, who hasn't been looking all that great in the passing game as of late. And like I mentioned earlier, it's really, really hard to run on Tampa Bay. You'd think that they come out here with a pass-heavy game plan. And Matt Ryan and the Falcons typically throw the ball a lot in general, so I'm not too worried about it. And like I mentioned earlier, Matt Ryan's best game of the year was against Tampa Bay. So, so I don't mind a Russell Gage here at 5,100. I think it's a pretty good play.
Yeah, that does sound like a good play. 4.2% owned, so he's a lot lower owned than some of the other receivers we're talking about.
Yep.
I wonder what's wrong with Julio Jones. Do you think it's the end of his prime career?
I hope not. I don't know.
He had a great career. We'll see what happens. Yeah, Gage is
so
an
many
interesting
injuries.
play this week.
Yeah. What's the ownership on Calvin Ridley?
Calvin Ridley, the fifth most owned wide receiver, 15.4%. Fairly high.
I like him a lot, too.
8,500. Yeah, he's been playing well. With Julio out, he's been staying healthy, which has been a problem for him this year.
He's been looking really good. All right, so getting into the next play here, it is going to be Mike Williams for the Chargers going against Kansas City here, and he is 5,000, averaging 10.3 DraftKings points. It is a 43.5-point game total. So Keenan Allen is out. Hunter Henry is out. So it should be, in theory, giving Williams a lot of opportunity here against the Chiefs in a game that really does not matter at all for the Chiefs. And this is more of like a boomer bust play. I would not be shocked if Mike Williams went out here and had a 30-point game. I would not be shocked if Mike Williams went out here and had a 1-point game. So kind of a boomer bust point play. That's kind of what you're looking for in GPP's tournament. So going to have some Mike Williams for that. Would not play him in cash because I do think the floor is low, but I do think has some decent upside.
Yeah, he's in the ownership. He's the 12th most owned. He's up a bit in ownership, 7.5%. Yeah, that's the problem with him. His ceiling and his floor, his floor is quite low, but his ceiling is pretty high. And like you said everything perfectly. It'll be interesting to see if the Chargers are going to want to try and win, and they got nothing to lose. They got a young quarterback. They're going to go out there and try and create some momentum for next year. So, there could be a high ceiling here. He's shown it before, and given the situation with all those receivers out, that's a very interesting play. But like you said, it's a risky play.
Big time, yep. Getting to the next one, it's going to be Kiki Kuti, 5,600 going against Tennessee here, averaging 11.1 DraftKings points in that 56.5-point game total, which is the highest on the slate. So he is the number 2 option on the Texans, solid upside, and don't mind stacking with Watson whatsoever. Don't mind like a Watson, Kuti, and Cook stack, something I did last week. It worked out pretty good. Probably going to go back to it here in a game that's probably going to shoot out. Probably lots of touchdown opportunity as well. So Kuti's somebody I'm looking at 5,600. I don't mind that price at all. I think it's a decent one for the game at least.
Not a bad price, yeah. 3.3% owned. He's fairly low owned, so that helps you out. So you played him last week also in a stack?
Yeah, I had the Deshaun Watson, Brandon Cooks, and Kiki Kuti stack, which I think it scored close to 100 there.
Well, that's fantastic. And he's still fairly low owned at 3% as part of that trio.
Yep.
Not bad at all.
Not bad. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised with that. And in a game that is 56.5-point game total, kind of weird to see him that low. But, yeah, I think it's a fine play.
That's low.
A lot lower than Brandon Cooks, so interesting. All right, and then the last guy I really want to touch on is going to be Sterling Shepard for the Giants going against Dallas here. And he has 5,100, averaging 13.1 DraftKings points, and it is a 45-point game total. So a good matchup here against Dallas, who has given up the third most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. Just a cheap play at low ownership, I hope. And I actually don't mind the matchup against Dallas here. So, yep, give me Shepard. Has been getting some decent targets as well. 12 targets last week, 7 in week 15. I do think the target's going to be there, and I do think there's some solid upside.
Yeah, he stayed healthy this year fairly much, and I was kind of expecting Slayton to take over as the number one, but Shepard's been great lately. 3.75% owned. That's a pretty good number. And again, as I pointed out earlier, Dallas versus the Giants is, for a potential playoff spot. So very important game.
Yep, exactly. So something to think about there. And I do want to point out some value plays. There's a lot. Honestly, I'd rather pay down at running back. There's so many good running back options than pay up at wide receiver. But if you do want to pay down at wide receiver, some guys I'm looking at, Josh Reynolds, 3,200, no Cooper Kupp. The problem is there's also going to be no Jared Goff. But this is a game that they need to win. So I think Reynolds is fine. Other than that, Richie James, San Francisco is missing a ton of players on offense. The problem with him is he played 91% of snaps last week against Arizona, had 1 target, no reception. So probably not going to go there all that much. If I was to pick like one value option, it'd probably be Josh Reynolds, honestly.
Yeah, James is 2% owned. And let me look up Reynolds here, if I can spell his name correctly. 4% owned, so he's a lot more owned. 3,200 is pretty cheap for him.
Yeah, if Jared Goff was playing, I'd probably load up on Reynolds, but since he's not, it's hard to go there too much.
A little wild game that's going to be.
Oh, yeah.
You ready for a couple other options here?
I'm ready. Let's hear them.
All right. Nelson Aguilar. What do you think about him? Let me look him up. I flipped over. He's 4% owned at $5,400. And again, that's that game with the Raiders playing at Denver, which, could. He's been a reliable guy. I don't know if 5,400 is too high. And the other guy is Zac Pascal for Indianapolis, who's been kind of, getting more opportunities as of late.
Yeah, good matchup there. Yeah, I like Aguilar. Yeah.
Do you?
5,400. I like him as like a run back option for a Denver stack. Like if you did a Denver stack with like a Drew Lock, a Jerry Jeudy, a Noah Fant, ran it back to Nelson Aguilar, you can probably make any lineup you want. That's a really cheap stack there, so I don't mind that at all.
And Zac Pascal is $4,200, and he's basically 3.9% owned. So, and he's been one of the more targeted players for Indianapolis the last few weeks. And of course, we mentioned Jeudy before. Let's look up. Jerry Jeudy is $4,200, and he's just under 5% owned.
Okay.
So a lot of low-owned players there, which are very tempting.
Yeah, I like it. Jeudy had 15 targets last week.
Yikes. Yeah, that's a lot of targets. But he's been so frustrated. I guess Lau was telling me that he got so mad they pulled him out of the game because he dropped a ball and they got all mad. They put him back in the game. And so, he sees all these rookies, wide receivers doing so well. And he's just frustrated. But they're trying to create some momentum. So they could be feeding him the ball. So he's an interesting play at basically a little under 5% owned.
Yep, don't mind it at all.
So those are the ones I had. I think we covered
I like
them all.
it. We covered a lot. I mean, on a 15-game slate, it's definitely have to. All right, so for the tight ends, like really, there's like 2 guys I'm going to mostly play. Other than that, I'm probably not going to play all that much. George Kittle, 6,000. If I could play George Kittle in 100% of my lineups, I would. He's averaging 16.8 DraftKings points and a 46-point game total. It seems way too cheap here at 6,000 for the amount of volume he's likely to get. Easily the best tight end play on the slate. And last week he was like very limited, and he still had 92 receiving yards, 4 receptions, 13.2 DraftKings points. Hopefully they don't limit him too much here, because I do think he has a ton of upside here against Seattle.
Yeah, that's the only worry you have there is that he did play him last week. He didn't get a lot of targets, but $6,000 is very tempting. He is the number one owned tight end at 15%, and I guess that's the only worry you have is will they limit him? And we don't have the answer to that one. But that is a tempting play. His ceiling is high.
Yeah, so 6,000 is not bad. In week 1, he was 7,200. So kind of a discount Kittle here.
Yes, definitely.
All right, and then the other guy I'm probably going to go to is going to be Irv Smith Jr., who is 3,900. I just like the game here. I like the 54-point game total. I like stacking in with Kirk Cousins. Of course, Rudolph's not going to be playing. He's on the IR. And Irv Smith had a really good game last week, 23.3 DraftKings points, 9 targets. To the 2 weeks before that, had 4 targets each game as well. So I think Irv Smith's not a bad look at that price of 3,900, 5 touchdowns on the year. And I would not be shocked if he found the end zone in a game that's projected to score very high here.
Yeah, 7.8% owned. He's the 4th most owned, but it's down a lot from Kittle. And like you said, $3,900 is a nice play for a guy who's right now the number 1 wide receiver. They've been throwing to him inside the red zone at the goal line. He's had a few games where he didn't get a lot of targets, but he got the touchdowns. So, again, like you said, at Detroit, maybe he's going to get a lot more targets today. And $3,900, that's a pretty nice price for a guy who may end up having a pretty damn good day.
Yeah, I like Irv Smith. I think he's very talented. I also like that Kyle Rudolph's not playing. It definitely gives him a lot more opportunity. Yeah. And then the last guy I do want to touch on is going to be Donald Parham Jr. for the Chargers, going against the Chiefs here. It is a 43.5-point game total. So what's interesting here is Keenan Allen's going to be out. Hunter Henry's going to be out. They really don't have many pass-catching options for the Chargers. He is the number 1 tight end on the team. So Kansas City is a team that has struggled versus the tight end. I believe they've given up the 5th most DraftKings points to opposing tight ends in a game that they're probably not going to try all that much, honestly. So I think Parham at 2,100 is not a bad look. Last week he did have 3 targets, 2 receptions. Would not be shocked if he found the end zone this week at probably low ownership and a really low price as well.
Yeah, very low ownership. As a matter of fact, we don't even have ownership for him.
There we go.
That's how low ownership he is. Now, I'm sure he's owned at a certain percentage, but sometimes it just doesn't register. So, yeah, that's an interesting play. That's a pretty good wild card right there, and very low ownership.
But yeah, it's mostly going to be between Kittle and Smith. But yeah, we'll have some Parham in a game that they're probably going to try to win here. Decent matchup. I like it.
Wow, that's interesting.
And then other than that, I think that Noah Fant is not a bad play at 4,400 going against the Raiders there. Pretty good total there. I think Hawkinson is a good play, 4,600. Seems really cheap there against Minnesota. Really good matchup there. Would not, of course, play him if Stafford was not playing, but I think Stafford's expected to play, right?
He's expected to play. It's just kind of worrisome that, he rolled his ankle last week. I watched it. Of course, I watched it sitting in my chair. It didn't look that bad. I hate to say that. And he was gone. Maybe they were. I don't know. It just worried me. It worries me. Can he play the whole game? We need to be a little more confident in him to play Hawkins. So you've got to hope that he's going to be playing. The quarterback's going to be playing the whole game because that'll make a big difference.
Yeah, if Stafford does not play the game, or if he does get hurt, then Hawkinson will probably not be a good play. But if Stafford plays the whole game, which maybe he can, 54-point game total, high-scoring game, good matchup, cheap price here for Hawkinson. He is averaging 11.4 DraftKings points, 6 touchdowns. Yeah, he's not having a bad year.
Yeah, that will hopefully, all fingers crossed, because he was his momentum was really great this year. He was a great play up until this last couple of weeks. So yeah, I like that.
And that's about it. Was there anybody else you want to throw out?
Well, you hit my guys. You hit my guys. You hit all my guys. I really don't. I don't have anybody other than the ones that you hit. So.
Yeah, those are probably my main ones I'm looking at.
Fantastic.
All right, and then we'll touch on defense a little bit. Of course, you can go up and play the Ravens against Cincinnati if you'd like. The Colts against Jacksonville if you do want to pay up. I'm probably going a little bit cheaper for defense. I think there's a lot of cheap options, starting with The Chargers at 2,800. They are averaging 4.7 DraftKings points per game. 43.5 point game total, which is a pretty low total. I think it's like the second lowest total on the slate. So Kansas City is resting their main guys. Low total, I think it's fine at 2,800. Going against Chad Henne, so I think they'll be okay at a pretty good cheap price there.
Yeah, that is interesting. He's the Chargers defense is the fifth most owned defense at 6.3%.
Not bad.
Ironically. Now, interestingly, Cleveland Browns are the highest owned defense against Pittsburgh. $2,500, 16% owned, and I'm assuming it's because Pittsburgh's pretty much benched everybody.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting play. It's kind of, just emotionally playing against Pittsburgh. Playing a defense against Pittsburgh just doesn't make sense. But maybe in Week 17 it makes sense. $2,500, that is low.
Oh, yeah. Cheap. It's probably my favorite defense, as it is for everybody else. But, yeah, Browns defense, going against Mason Rudolph at home in a game they need to win. At a low total, yeah, I like it a lot. I think there's a lot of upside there with the Browns defense.
Wow, that is interesting. Those are some good
ones. And then, one more I'll throw out, and it's kind of a punt defense, but I actually think it's a pretty solid punt defense. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Jets defense at 2,300, averaging 4.3 DraftKings points. It is a 40-point game total, which is the lowest on the slate. Very low total there. And we can't ignore how bad the Patriots offense has been looking, how bad Cam Newton's been looking. And I know the Jets defense, I know it's the Jets, but the Patriots have been looking awful. And I would not be shocked if the Jets even won this game here. So I think the punt option for the Jets at 2,000 is not a bad look.
Yeah, that was one I was going to bring up. 4.3% owned, fairly low owned, but people are catching on to that opportunity, but it's still relatively low owned. $2,300.
Yeah.
The only thing that worries me about that is I can get Cleveland at $2,500. So
exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, but if you want to be different, you would go with the Jets.
Yep. If you want to be different, or if you want to save 200 more, the Jets is fine. But yeah,
sometimes
Browns is probably my
make a difference.
Yep, big time. All right, so that's about it for me. Anything else you want to throw out?
No, I think we caught a lot. It's just Darwin Thompson. I did mention he's supposed to get the bulk of carries for Kansas City, and let me really quick to see if he's even got any. I can't spell very well. He probably doesn't have any ownership. Oh, he does have ownership. 0.4% ownership for Darwin Thompson, Kansas City running back. He's got a $4,400 salary, which I was expecting a little lower. What's the minimum? 4,000?
Yeah, I was expecting 4,000.
Pretty close, but he's a real quirky play. But he's supposed to get the majority of the bulk of the carries, as they say. So he's an interesting guy. A total bizarre idea is Perry for Seattle, because they Hyde's inactive, is supposed to be inactive. And maybe they're going to get Perry some carries, but I'm just saying. I'm not suggesting. But
something worth
this is Week 17, and maybe they're going to get that guy out a little more. Maybe he gets lucky, and I don't even know if he's owned at 0.0% according to our data at 4,000.
0.0. I like it.
But he's on the list, so there's some action there, but very similar. So I forgot to mention those. Those are very quirky ideas that I like to bring up, just to tantalize the audience.
I like it.
So that's it. Well, great year. This has been a blast year. I'm not sure if we're going to do any more. We'll have to talk about that because there's Saturday games, and obviously that kind of messes things up. But it's been a great year, and sounds like you and I have made a little money, and hopefully our listeners have done that also.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a great year. Hopefully come back next year as well. Yeah, let's win some more money on Week 17. Let's go out on a high note here.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, and good luck to you, and good luck all the listeners today here, the crazy Week 17 of DFS.